Hello, we're gonna go ahead and start project review committee for today, August 31st, 2012 at 1:43 p.m. I'm gonna go ahead and do roll call. Joined by myself, Oscar Cepeda, the associate planner. We're also joined by Javier Sanchez, the engineering and project management director. We're also joined by James Wickersham, the chief building inspector. We're joined by Michael Knight, the Public Works Director. We're also joined by Clayton Dignam, the Fire Marshal. And we're also joined by Brianna Spree, right, with the Field Services. And also Jeff O'Neill, the Interim City Planner.
Oscar, just going to note also in my office, I have David Payne, Water Utility Superintendent, and Robert Alvarez, Field Service Manager.
Thank you, Michael. Now, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open oral communications. This is the opportunity for members of the public to address the committee on any matter pertaining to project review. Seeing that we only have the applicants here for today's item, I'm going to go ahead and close oral communications. So I'm going to go ahead and start the first item on the agenda, which is Project Review Committee number 2022-021 for the applicant Manuel and Araceli Casares, in which they're proposing a preliminary residential parcel map to divide the existing 0.7 acres property into two parcels. Parcel 1 has been identified as 7,500 square feet and parcel 2 as 10,536. The subject site property is located at 22222 Avenue 154 in the RS2 low density residential zone district. So at this time, let me go ahead and share my screen so I can pull up the proposed map. As far as the comments from planning, it's going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to require to process a tentative map of the division of the property. As far as the process is going to be to comply with our Series 400, which is our land division chapter. And again, we're going to require to do a tentative map, also a final map. As far as the fees for the tentative map, it's going to be $1,500. There is going to be an environmental fee, which we can make the determination of a notice of exemption for minor land divisions, in which staff would be preparing a notice of exemption for a fee of $79. There's also going to be a county filing fee of $58, which is made payable to Tulare County Clerk. This process will require a parcel map committee, which is a public hearing, and it will require this project to be notified to the public minimum 10 days prior to the parcel map committee date. So staff can also prepare a maps and labels mailing for a fee of $26.50. Once a tentative map has been approved by the parcel map committee, then the next step after that, within 2 years, unless an extension has been requested, the proper owner would have to process a final map. The fees for final map is $955. And the only other comment that we will have is in the future, if we further develop the property, we just want to make sure that we're gonna comply with the Porterville Development Ordinance as far as the development of the property. But other than that, that's all the comments from planning. Does the applicant have questions for planning at this time?
No.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and move it along with the engineering division with Javier Sanchez.
Right. Thanks, Oscar. For this lot,
water is already existing, sewer is currently going in with the construction project. And so it's really just gonna come down to frontage improvements. For concrete improvements that go in, so curb gutter and sidewalk. And even that, we have a grant project that we're working on that could install it in the next like 2 years or so. So I don't know what time frame you're looking at for the. Well, this is just a slot split.
Yeah.
We'll have to work through the details and see if, knowing our projects coming through, whether that would fulfill the improvement requirements, or if we need to have improvements to now prior to recording the map. So I'll dig a little bit more on that and provide a clear answer on the comments.
Thank you.
So that's all engineering.
Thank you, Javier. Does the applicant have any questions for engineering?
No, I'm fine right now.
Okay, thank you, Manuel. Next, with fire department with Clayton.
Fire department has no comments with regard to the lot split.
No comments from fire department. Thank you. Next with building with James.
Same, no comments from building.
No comments from building. Thank you, James. Next with Michael Knight.
Sorry about that. I was looking at the aerial of the property. Just to kind of go back, Javier, on that question in regards to the sewer project in the area. Yeah, we have an existing service out there. With the sewer project, would this require 2 sewer laterals once the property is split?
It would, yes, because of the split.
And so that would follow in addition to the water service. I just from the frontage observation, I'm not for sure if there's 2 services there currently, but it would require 2 services once the lot was split to separate the 2 residences.
That's a good point. I'll coordinate with our inspectors and see if that has been brought up in the field or not. The good thing is they're not in this area yet. They're right around the corner, so we can discuss that.
Okay. And then just in addition, Bree, I would assume that this would require additional CAN service once the lot was split, treating it like a separate address?
Correct.
That should be the only comments from Public Works this time.
Thank you, Michael. I think that's all from staff, unless there's any other comments from staff, or if the applicant has any questions for staff at this time.
No, I don't have any more questions right now.
Okay, Manuel, and then as far as today's meeting and the comments provided by staff, we will be compiling that in a letter in about 2 to 4 weeks. That way we could get that out to you, which will basically outline our comments and the process to move forward with your project.
Okay, I'll be waiting for that.
Thank you, Manuel.
No, thank you guys for your help. I appreciate that.
And if you want to stick around and hear the next item, you're more than welcome.
I will be here. I don't have nothing else to do right now. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we're going to continue with the second item on today's agenda, which is Project Review Committee number 2022 022, which is a 20-unit multifamily residential project. At the subject site of a 2.86 acre property located on the north side of Jubilee Lane, adjacent to Westfield Avenue. The subject site is within the RM2 medium density zone district. So let me go ahead and pull up that information real quick. But I think we could start with the fire department first. That way, we could kind of outline first, just some safety measures or fire codes that may be required as far as this development. And then that way we could kind of work around those requirements.
Okay.
Um,
Fire hydrants shall be placed based on distance no greater than 300-foot spacing as a hose would lay. Depending on the location of the existing hydrants and the required fire flow, additional hydrants may be required. Where 2 or more hydrants are required for a project, the hydrants shall be on a looped system. No structures greater than 400 feet from a fire hydrant with your spacing that should cover that. All hydrants must be in place and accepted by the fire department prior to any combustibles being brought onto the site. If the driveway is longer than 150 feet to the public street, you'll have to have either a required turnaround. In this case, looks like you have it here. However, we're gonna require you to maintain 2 points of entry and exit to the property. 2 points. 2 points of entry and exit to the property because of the number of homes going in here and the potential for traffic congestion. We're gonna wanna be able to have an alternate route in or an alternate route out. In addition to that, the entry as it is shown is not meet code. Currently, the 2019 code is adopted and it allows for that separation with a minimum of a 12-foot opening. But I will advise you that in the adoption cycle for the 2022 code, when we go in January, we're actually going to be increasing that to either 14 or 16 feet on a separated roadway.
So if he submits after
So
the first of the
if you submit
year,
after the first of the year, it potentially could be wider, which takes up your island or takes up some of this stuff here on there to get that open in. Now, the secondary access point can simply, for example, if you could create a separation here and we had a 20-foot drive and you had a cross access agreement with the property to the west of you, you could do a 20-foot, a double gate that when it opens is 20 feet. And it does not have to allow the tenants entry and exit on a regular basis. It's simply a secondary point of access for the fire department. We would require a Knox box to be, or Knox lock to be put on that. Or if you did electric, just an electric gate opener. Same thing up front. If you do electronic gates, you'll need to have Knox access, key access for us to get access in there. Maintain a minimum of 20-foot roadways, which are showing 25s, and essentially address numbers posted. Looks like that's pretty much it. The fire apparatus access road will have to be marked up. There'll be no stopping, standing, or parking. Red curb, all of that. So we can't have, even though you've got center island parking, these are not going to be wide enough to allow for parking stalls to encroach. So this will all have to be curved out so that there's no parking so that we can get the equipment in and out and around.
Okay. Curved out, you mean curved out as far as maybe where the front of the house or?
So the fire lane's required to be a minimum of 20 feet, whichever side you choose to give us.
Okay.
That 20 feet measurement from is there, unless you just chose to do the whole thing as part of the project and give us more than the 20 feet, give us the 25 feet and just say there's just no parking there. So, because otherwise we get into a situation where we go in over here for a medical aid call in the middle of the night and these guys have all stacked their cars parked on the road and then we've got to back up, get around and go all the way around. That just delays response to people.
You mentioned curbing, but
no, curbing is not my thing. Curbing is not my thing.
It could be just
I
solid
mean,
red or something.
yeah, it just needs to be red and there needs to be signage indicating that this is a fire lane, that there's no stopping, standing, or parking.
Perfect.
So, yeah, and then like I said, if you install gates here, they need to have Knox access for us to get through.
Okay. Then as far as so we mentioned the second entry, would the second entry, it would have to be on the northern end? Or would I be able to maybe,
It depends on your ability to negotiate with the properties around you. This is not big enough for us to fit both of them on the same street.
okay,
So whichever property you can negotiate a minimum 20-foot access through to get back to a roadway, that would be in your best interest to start working on that.
I wouldn't be able to just go away from one unit and then just, no.
Because they're too close together. It requires that it be no more than half the diagonal distance.
Okay.
So the diagonal distance measurement from here to here of the property It's, the second access is no more than half of that distance from this. Or no closer than half of that distance.
Sounds good. So with.
And the way I'm looking at it, again, it's just an assumption on my part that the west, because that was undeveloped.
Correct.
So,
That'd probably be more feasible than the other part.
well, and the other thing is looking at the use of that property, I'm inclined to accept that on that side because that property is really only used 1 day a week. And the rest of the time it remains available for an emergency. Okay, so,
Sounds good.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clayton. As far as planning, it's gonna be more in regards to kind of just making some minor adjustments to the project here. The units here that is abutting Jubilee, we want to make sure that there's enough architecture articulation, different pop outs, projection, recesses to meet code. Also, the entrance to the units, the porch, the entrance doesn't meet our minimum requirements of it being 50 square feet. I believe right now you're about 30, I made a note here. I think you're at 33 square feet. You do meet the depth of minimum 5 feet, but it requires for it to be minimum 50 square feet total area. Maybe an easy solution is to add like a porch that projects out to add that extra square footage.
Okay.
Cause it could be either a projection or a recess. In this case, we could combine both and to meet the minimum, or if you want to make, you know, more changes to that, you're more than welcome. As far as the setbacks, you know, you meet setbacks, lot coverage, I know you do. You are showing open space, private and common. We will require walkways, pedestrian walkways that link each unit to the right of way and also into any internal facilities. Also that those walkways be pedestrian friendly in regards to lighting. And other than that, that's pretty much our major comments from planning. You know, just complying with our development standards and our landscaping standards also, want to point that out. But other than that, you know, it's a pretty good, pretty well designed layout of the units. It's just making those minor changes, you know, to meet code. If you propose any fencing around the development, we do have those standards also. That it be architecturally compatible with the development. We do have height limitations. You can go up to 6 feet, 7 feet possibly. And even up to 8 feet with the zoning administrator determination. Any fencing within the front yard setback cannot exceed 4 feet. Right. Any mechanical equipment, of course, needs to be screened. But other than that, that's all comments, major comments from planning at this time.
And as far as the fencing, is there any specific type of fencing that needs to go up?
Residential districts allows chain link fencing. You can do wrought iron, or you can do, you know, block fencing if you like. Once you go with block, then you know that regardless of, they do have a height that it will require a permit over, what is it?
Block,
For block fencing,
4 feet,
4 feet.
including footing.
No hazardous fencing though. You know, what is it, razor wire or any other fencing that may be considered hazardous. Okay. But yeah, that's pretty much from planning at this time. Next with engineering.
Right, let's see. For engineering. There is water and sewer around the area. So it'd just be tying into that. You know, there's sewer in Westfield here. And then there's also, it doesn't show here, but there's also sewer along Highway 65.
Correct.
So it just needs to get pulled in, except this would require easement, because it's, on the
Sewer?
adjacent property.
Would. If I believe that sewer line runs along the east side there,
Mhm.
would we be able to connect from the, down at the bottom of the embankment, which is all dirt? And then just cut across the street there somehow, rather than, yeah, correct, where that water line runs right there on, correct. Along the embankment there,
Oh,
that's the
okay.
bottom of the embankment, so would we be able to connect? Basically from this point, somewhere along this point to cut into the dirt rather than cutting into the street to connect to what from Westfield.
Oh,
Oh, so you wanna put the sewer line this way?
Correct. But that's all dirt that could easily be compacted rather than cutting into.
right,
That's probably.
it's, should be all right of way, yeah, I think it's an option as long as, it's steep enough and by the time you extend it to your development, that there's enough depth.
Correct.
To serve all the units.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's an option. Waters.
If you want to look at that map again, Javier, we could probably talk about if you can pull up the GIS map to show the utility.
Mhm.
So in the discussion of the looped water service, it looks like you would have to come off of the frontage and then tie back in over off of the easement along 65. That should be a fire hydrant for that facility, so I wouldn't assume you
Oh, this
could tie to that, but you would probably have to tie back in along the frontage, and so the sewer runs both ways. I don't know if the sewer is gonna be looped in and out, or depending on the flow needs or the capacity of the development, that you could go straight through, just a consideration.
So I might potentially be having to tie into the east side there of the roadway on the north side of that church.
I think it would just depend on what capacity, what the flow capacities or demands are gonna be for service. I would have to double check the main size, and I haven't seen or ran calculations on that yet.
And that hydrant loop's gonna have to go back out somewhere else. It can't come back to that Jubilee. Like it can't, because otherwise it's just creating a flag.
Yeah.
So it'll need to go up and then go through somewhere at some point and connect to one of those other water lines.
So that's where that easement discussion is probably very important.
Okay.
And you can view this map on the city's website as well.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
But besides that, the only other thing we'd be looking at is the street lights. Potentially needed. You know, at least one, maybe two.
49 across.
You'll probably end up one on each corner. Yeah,
Yeah, cause I have one here.
so, and then obviously the concrete improvements are there, so just cutting in your access to from that. And that's all the engineering would have.
So the sewage would have to be looped too then?
No,
Or no, just the water,
just the water.
just the water.
Yeah, sewer. But as long as you have elevation, it should just be from one point. or what Mike was alluding to, is that say you, this line isn't deep enough, you branch off it to serve the lots on the south.
Correct.
And then maybe
Okay.
go off the north one for those few out there.
And then if you're already gonna be tying in off of the 65, you know, depending on elevations and size, like I said, instead of going all the way out into the middle of Westfield to tie into that sewer line, it may be easier to tie into the front edge off of 65.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Do you want to continue with Public Works, Michael, in regards to your comments or?
Sure. Yeah, I can, really, you know, there's nothing really shown on the water layout here, but as it relates to utility, we've discussed sewer. Ultimately, the sewer within the complex should be private, so at one point it'll be a designation of the private side of the sewer service. Water, how are you planning on serving water to the units? Is it going to be one master meter servicing the whole complex, or is there going to be individual meters for each complex?
Ideally, I would want individual.
So then that gets a little bit more complicated in placement, you know, because you're right on the public right of way, and depending on how it is done, traditionally we would not look to maintain the water main within your complex. So you would have individual meters, and of course the city would maintain the meters, but the plumbing within the facility would be privately owned.
Correct.
And so that,
Would,
I'm
would,
sorry,
would that be doable though, as far as if I maintain all the water lines within that lot, you guys would just take care of the meters?
yeah, so essentially we would provide the meters, we would take care of the billing. It would be a you know, full service. Just should you have an issue in the, because we run into to complex situations where if a water line breaks within the facility, now the city is providing, you know, doing work on private property, right? So it's better if there's a clean break on that. So we would look to see how we lay that out, and we can better define that once we get to a final layout. But essentially, we would look to have private water service within the facility with city maintained meters for billing. Similar to what we do in trailer parks and commercial facilities. So we would maintain that.
Okay. Would you need a specific area for those meters, or would those go? Where would those go as far as the?
So generally they would go to, so how you have the two units there at the southern eastern portion, you would do 2 meters in between those two units, ideally, so that you have one set of services coming off your main, and then kind of go up with your mouse a little bit, Oscar, and to the street in between there. So you would put a meter box on each side there that would one go to each unit, or two, you'd have 2 for each unit, so that you could label them A and B, and so on and so forth through there for each unit.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further comment on water, and happy to discuss any of that further, should more questions come up after this review. But next would be refuse service. With the number of units, this development would require 4 3-bin enclosures. And so those would include 4-yard commercial bins, 1 for general waste, recycling, and organics. And so we would need to position those 4 throughout this development. Potentially we can make depending on how the driveway gets constructed, we can direct stab that one. And then potentially what I would think you would do is look to install 2 trash enclosures, somewhat back-to-back mid-block for adequate service for the tenants. And then down on the north end, we would have to do something a little different under its current configuration, because if there was an enclosure in the end there, we couldn't back up to service that. So that enclosure would have to get repositioned in some manner to where we can direct stab that without having to try to maneuver the truck back into that corner to be able to service that.
Okay,
But happy to discuss that further, or any any other comments on how we can make that work. And those calculations are based on 1 week service, so it's essentially a half a yard service per unit that drives that calculation.
thank you.
That's all the comments I had, and unless there's any other questions.
I'm just going back to the water. Would we be able to pull up the water again? So I'm trying to. I'll be asking for easement for that secondary exit or entry point. But let's say worst case scenario where I can't have that easement to the water line on that east edge of 65. Would I be able to tap into kind of take another water line from that basically where that 65 and Westfield run down at that corner, around there somewhere, and tap in another line directly into that property?
I would defer to fire, but it's really close to the same point of service. And it would basically void the 2 points of connection. So should you have a catastrophic event within the complex, the purpose of 2 points of connection is to ensure that you have adequate fire flow to the complex. But I would defer to Clayton on that.
Yeah, I would agree that, again, that would be going off of that point and going up and putting it in and coming back is gonna be basically creating a flag. Which what we're really trying to accomplish here is same as 2 ways in, 2 ways out for the drive, 2 ways in, 2 ways out for the water. So that way, if one side is compromised and it gets shut down or isolated, we still have water flowing from the other direction.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay.
And just from clarification on that, Javier, is essentially, does that have to be, and I guess Clayton as well, is that an improved secondary access? Or is that, a dirt access with a gate, or it's improved?
It has to be improved. It'll be required to be improved. First and foremost, it has to be able to hold the imposed load of 75,000 pounds. And it has to be an all-weather surface.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that was.
It may require, I know you guys can't see this, but let's say that secondary access goes somewhere up here in this dirt area. You may end up having to pave out some to get out of there. And then, like looking at the water, having a connection point here and having a connection point somewhere up here gives us the ability that should we isolate or lose one side, we have water flowing. Whereas if we have this point of connection in here and something happens and we shut it down, we lose all of our water.
Right.
Okay. So.
All right, thank you. Any other, I think that was all from Michael. Let me see, Brianna, do you have anything else to add?
No, Mike covered it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Building with James.
Yeah, so it won't be much for me. It's a standard, the same layout, so, plan submittal for that. Sprinkler system, for each duplex. You got the separation requirement. No ADA necessary, it's a duplex. Yeah, that's it. Just there will be some standard comments that you'll get on plan submittal. But other than that, that's all.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, James. Jeff, you've been quiet today. Do you have any comments? No comments?
No, I think you passed along everything we talked about at pre-PRC last week, so.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, unless the applicant has any further questions for staff at this time?
No, I believe we covered everything. As far as the fate, would I be able to do this project in phases? Where I start with phase 1, phase 2, possibly 3 and 4?
That could be an option, but I know that there's gonna be some items that you're gonna have to put in place at certain phases, more for life and safety.
So yeah, so like the water system for the whole project would have to go in at once.
Correct.
For phase 1, for all the phases, and then that kind of stuff. And then the secondary access point would probably trigger, it may not trigger off of the first phase, depending on how many units you do, just because of distance.
Okay.
So long as we have the required turnaround and spaces in there. But then as we start developing and get further and further away from the road, then that triggers the secondary access. And what I'd hate for you to do is say we do phase 1, we go to phase 2 right here, and you have to put in a temporary access here, but you really, the ultimate one is between 3 and 4, and so you've got to end up putting another one in, and to close that one up, because you just put a temporary one. So it's just a thought.
Okay. Sounds good.
And I'm not sure if you might plan this in the future, but if you do plan on subdividing this property, either tentative map or parcel map, we could also provide comments on that.
Okay.
Yeah, so other than that,
Sometimes on deferred
Go ahead.
fee, on phase projects, sometimes there's deferred fees that are owed. That, so. Those deferred fees, normally will need to get paid out, before you can move forward in phases.
Okay. Not a problem. As far as the road requirement, is there concrete or asphalt?
That's an improved surface, yeah.
Does that
For temporary, and you can see this, you'll see this across the highway, the project that's going in now, or from Westfield to Cobb. They have a temporary class 2 road base in. That's only there during construction. It has to be improved prior to final.
sounds good. So yeah, so we'll
Oscar,
Go ahead.
sorry, is the playground area required?
open space. Common open space is a requirement.
I was just thinking with the fans.
No,
Hey,
yeah,
Oscar, just
Go
to
ahead.
provide some additional input on the water,
sure.
the way we would isolate the separation from the city system and the private system would be the water feeds to the complex would have backflow preventers. So that's how we would determine the separation from the city system to the private system. So if it's looped in on the southern portion and the northern portion, there would be 2 back devices in there that would provide a protection of the city system for the complex. So happy to discuss that further if you have any additional questions, but just wanted to mention the backflow preventer in there to protect the city system.
Thank you.
All right, sounds good. So, as mentioned on the previous, project, we'll compile today's, comments from each department, provide them in a letter, hopefully to get them out in about 2 to 4 weeks. That way, you could, make those changes and reach out to the adjacent property owners and see if they could, allow you to, use their property for that secondary access and easements. And then again, looking forward to, moving this project along and hopefully it gets built out.
Thank you guys for your guys' time. Appreciate it. One last question. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
As far as the when I go present this to the adjacent property, does it matter whether it's on the south end there of that vacant lot or the north end? Is there any preference as far as that goes, or?
Well, the easement's gonna have to come off probably that northern end,
The northern
for the secondary access point. And then, like I said, you may have to pave down a portion to their paved parking area.
Right.
To create that. Now, at the end of that, in your negotiations with them, you can put a gate there and a gate on that, so it keeps people out of that and off of that as a fire.
Okay, like here,
Yeah,
okay.
Then he would need another easement for the water.
right, so he'd be negotiating his easements with them, you know, one for water and one for water and potentially sewer, and then one for a secondary access point in the event of an emergency for fire.
Is that the church's property?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's all
yeah.
one. Yeah,
Oh,
that's all
okay.
one.
So essentially I could ask for that north, just where that asphalt maybe ends and just,
Turn it into
Sure,
right there,
correct.
depending on where that falls up in this area.
correct, and I don't have to adjust that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, the only thing you need to do is then just adjust the distance between them to allow for a minimum of 20-foot roadway. And then however much setback you guys require from the roadways.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, sounds good, Abel. So again, we'll have these comments out for you hopefully in 2 to 4 weeks. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate it. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and end today's project review committee at 2:24 PM. Thank you, everybody.
So just
Where's that?